Good afternoon, guys. Welcome back into my channel. So in this lab, we're going to talk about the private, public, and elastic IP with AWS. So what is public, private, and elastic IP in AWS? So AWS provide three types of IP addresses. So private IP, a private IP, and private and public IP and elastic IP. So while private IP addresses are used to internal communication within the VPC, public and elastic IP allows establishing communication with the internet. So let's see here. What is this? To do instance IP documentation. So EC2 instance IP addresses. So Amazon EC2 and Amazon VPC support both the IPv4 and v6 addressing protocol by default. Amazon VPC uses IPv4 addressing protocol. You can't disable this behavior. When you create a VPC, you must specify the IPv4 CIDR block. Arrange, bang, bang, bang. Let me see if I find the right article that I need here. Yeah, so basically it's talk about the behavior of all the three IPs. So the private IP, it says a private IP address, a private IPv4 address is an IP address that's not reachable over the internet. You can use private IPv4 addresses for communication between instances in the same VPC. For more information, you could check the RFC 1918. So note, you can create a VPC with a publicly routable CIDR block that falls outside of the private IPv4 address ranges specified in RFC 1918. However, the purpose of this documentation will refer to private IPv4 addresses or private IP addresses as the IP addresses that are within the IPv4 CIDR range of the IPVs, of your VPC. So VPC subnet can be one of the following types. So subnet, tick, tick, tick. So let's check the public IP. So a public IP addresses is an IPv4 addresses that reachable from the internet. You can use public addresses for communication between your instances and the internet. So you can launch an instance in a default VPC. We assign it public IP addresses by default. When you reach an instance into a non-default VPC, the subnet as an attribute that determines whether instances launch into that subnet receive a public IP addresses from the public IP address pool. By default, we don't assign a public IP addresses to instances launching a non-default subnet. So instances, so note instances that access other instances through the internet, not network address translation, IP addresses, or charge for regional or internet data transfer depending on whether the instances are in the same region. So elastic IP addresses. So an elastic IP address is a public IPv4 addresses that you can allocate to your account. You can associate it into you can associate it and disassociate it from instances as you require. It's allocated to your account until you choose to release it. For more information, you can check these out. So let's just go ahead and perform a couple of simulations with these IP addresses. So let's say, for instance, I have an instance right there. I went ahead and just select the instance. It would show you that it comes with a public IP address. Now, this public IP address is not a permanent IP address, because if you were to stop your instance and restart it, this public IP address will be changed. Now it come also with the private IPv4 addresses, which is this one here. Now that address stay permanently. As long as these instances exist, this IP will not change. That's the private IP address. If you look here, you will see the IP addresses is neither here and there. Now, if you scroll down, see, okay, so there we go again. There is this, the public IP address is the same as it is here, and the private IP address is 172.31.94.93 EC2 and internal. So that's the host type and the private IP addresses. So if we click on security, so that's about the same. So we allow port 22, which is the TCP. So if you want to log in, SSH into this machine, you could use this. And if you want to, access your web server into the internet, you could use either port HTTP or HTTPS, so it don't matter. So now if you want to add a new rule for HTTPS, you could add that too as well, and I can show you how to do that, and I'm pretty sure you should be able to, you should know how to do this. Now let's go ahead and connect into this machine, into this web server. So we could click here, connect. Now you have a multiple ways to connect into this server. They have the EC2 instance connect and the session manager and SSH client and EC2 serial console. Now these two ones here are the most common ones. Now, by the way, to be honest, if you want to SSH, you see the SSH, the way to SSH into this machine, they give you an example. So it's SSH minus I, my key pair, my Amazon key that perm, and the EC2 minus user at EC2 and the public IP address. So that's if you want to SSH into this machine. Now, if you wanna if you want to connect into this machine directly from the EC2 instance connect, you can just go ahead and click here and just hit connect as the username. That's the username here. They give you that by default, so you could just go ahead and connect to this. Now there we go. It says establishing connection. So basically we log into the machine right now. So the image is Amazon Linux 2023. And what do we have here? It says https://linux.amazon 2023. So let me try this here and see if this will work for me. So there we go. This is so fast. So, and so if you look here, you would see that IP address we have here is the IP address of the private IP that we've been provided here. By the instance, we go back, we click on instances, and we select this. Now there go the private IP address that we've been provided, and that's what we have here as the private IP address. Now this address don't change. Now let me show you something. Now you see, by the way, let me just where do I was? Okay, let's just close one of those. Now, just a second. Now, the proof that this machine is online, I could say, who am I? It would say the user, the EC2 user. What if I say ping google.com, and it's ping it, so I could do Control-C and just stop what I'm doing. Now, you see this address don't change, the private IP address never changed. Now, watch this. There I go the public IP address. Let's say, for instance, if I were to copy this, let's say if we were to ping this address. Let's say we say ping, and let's see this. Okay, so now that's the IP address of the same machine. That's why it will not ping. Now, the only reason I'm doing this is just to show you that if I were, now you see, this is the public IP address. This is the public IPv4 of this EC2 instance, which is the web server. So it's 52.55.10.12. Now, say I go here, I go on instance states, I stop the instance. Now, there's a difference between stop an instance, reboot the instance, and terminate the instance. If you want to erase this instance, you would consider to hit this button as, select terminate instance. If you want to reboot that, you could hit this one. But if you want to just stop the instance and just make this instance being inactive, but not reboot and not terminate, you could just go ahead and click here. Now, keep in mind that there go the public IP address before the instance was being rebooted. Not rebooted, but being stopped. So go ahead and just stop the instance. Now the instance is stopped, right? Let me try this. As a matter of fact, here's what I should do. Let me start this instance again. I'm going to show you something. Let's say, is this instance stop here? Is this instance stop? Let me refresh and see if if I stop the instance already. Now let's go to instances and see the instance state is stopped. So instance state is stopped. So let me start this instance and show you something. I got to select this page, which I forget. I apologize for that. So let me just start this instance and I'll show you something. Now let me hit refresh. Now let me select instance and select the web server instance and just refresh since it says pending. Let's go instance. So it's still pending, right? Now, if you notice, even though that the instance is pending, there go the new IP address of this instance. If I were to go here, now remember the IP address that we had earlier, yep, it says it's stop. So it was stop. See? Okay, so I'll show you this. Now, let's say I go to terminal, just like with, and I do ping, paste. Now see, it says ACMP timeout request. Let me just go over there and see if my instance is being running now. Does this instance run? Instance running? Instances and select it. So they go the IP address. Now you could, if you notice that this IP address is different from the IP address that we had earlier before we had stopped and we start the instance. Now let's switch back over there and see. Say ping. You see something? Say ping. Oh, sorry. Google. Chrome. So what is it about this instance that doesn't work? Okay, let's say ping. It says 8.8.8. Okay, so I'm not sure why. Now, again, if I go here, oh, sorry. Let me just refresh this. Now, there go the IP address before the instance was stopped. I mean, there go this IP address. Let's say I stop the instance. Let's go here. Let's say I stop the instance. As soon as I stop the instance, it says that the system will power off now, right? So the system will power off now. Now, there go the IP address before you. If you notice that this IP address never changed, that's the private IP address from the instance. Now, if you notice that the IP address that we had earlier was a 54.52.92.90. Now we have 54.152.30.74. Now let's go back over there. I'll show you something real quick. I enjoy these technologies. So let's check these out. Let's say we select instance, right? And then now keep in mind, so instance being stopped, right? The private IP address never changed. Now we're going to get a new public IP address as soon as we refresh this. Let's go ahead and select instance, select it. Let's see if it's gonna give us a new public IP address, which is different from this IP address that was 54.152.30.74. Now let's say if we were to select this and just grab, let's say okay, let's say we have note. Okay, let's grab note, right? It's note. Let's say we had new note. So there go the IP address. No, that's the private IP address here. So let's say we switch back over right there. And we copy this and we back here. Let's say we grab this note. So there go the private IP, which never changed. There go the public IP that we had. Make this big as there go the public IP. Let's call this private. Let's call this private IP. Private IP. And there go the temp, I would say temp, which is temporary public IP. So temporary public IP, because this is gonna change. Not public, public IP. So, and also, so let's say if we switch back over, let's say we switch back over and we go here. Now you see, it gives us a new IP address, which is different from that IP that we had earlier. Now, there got a new IP that we've been provided. So you could tell that this is 54.157 and this is 54.152. That 50, that 18, and that 30.74. Okay, so now let's back out here. Now, how do we change that? Well, the way to change that is to set up an elastic IP address. As I just give you, let me Google that and show you. What is an elastic IP address? So an elastic IP address is a reserved public IP addresses that you can assign to any EC2 instance in a particular region until you choose to release it to allocate an elastic IP address to your account in a particular region. See allocation on elastic IP address. So let's go ahead. So what is an elastic IP address is used for? So an elastic IP address, which is EIP addresses, is more than a static IP address. IPv4 addresses that is designed for a dynamic cloud compute. The main purpose of these IPs is to mask the failure of a software or instance from your AWS account. So let's just switch back. Oh, sorry. Let's just switch back here and assign an elastic IP. So all you got to do is just go on the left-hand side and scroll all the way down here to network and security. So you have security group, and down below security group, you have elastic IP. So you click here and you click where it says allocate elastic IP address. So it says Amazon pool of IP addresses. Now keep in mind that the tricky part about allocate an elastic IP address is that if you allocate an elastic IP address, you don't use it, you're gonna get charged for that. So make sure that whenever you allocate an elastic IP address, you assign this IP into an EC2 instance. So let's go ahead and says allocate. Now you could click on action. You could say associate elastic IP, or either you could click here. Now we have this IP address, right? Just click on it. And if we go here, you have release elastic IP, update reserve DNS. And so let's just go ahead and associate this IP. So let's associate this IP into our instance, which is my web server running. And you have the private IP address, which never change, because if you go here, you will see that there go the private IP address. So this IP address never changed. Their public IP address changed, but the private, the private IP address never changed. So now we're trying to demonstrate a way to make this public IP address never change anymore. The way to do that is to allocate an elastic IP address, which that's what we're doing here. So let's go ahead and just click associate. Now, there go the IP address. Remember that. That's the IP address we associated. So let's go, bang, bang, bang. Let me see, where do I find this? Okay, so it's right there. I'm just trying to keep in track of what I'm doing so you would understand. Now, I paste this new IP. This is the new IP address that we associate. And now keep in mind, this is the IPv4 that we associate as an elastic IP. So what the purpose of doing this is to making sure that you have one particular IP address that's assigned into your EC2 instance, and whether your machine is stopped, reboot, and restart. So it will never give you a different IP address from that IP that you associated. So that's the whole purpose of associate an elastic IP. So let's just go back here and show you what I mean. So this has been associated already. So let's just go here. Now, let's click on instances. Let's select my web server, and there go the IP. You see the IP that we have here? This is the same IP that we have here. Let's make this grand so everybody can see it. Okay, so let's switch back out and I'll show you something. Now, watch this. If I were to go here on instance states and I stop my instance, now remember earlier when we stopped the instance, so the instance is being stopped, because check this out. If we refresh, it would give you, so fail to connect to your instance. So unable to connect to the instance because the instance is not in a valid state. Connecting to a stop or terminated instance is not supported. If the instance is stopped, start your instance and try to connect again. Now let's go back here. If we check the states, so it still says running, but all you gotta do is just refresh it. It will display the instance state is stopped as it is stopped. Just select this, Let's just go here. So you see here the instance is stopped. Now, if you observe, you will see that the IP address of the instance is the same as it was before it was stopped. So it's 44.206.114.64. Let's just switch back here. It's 44.206.114.67. I mean 67, not 64. I'm sorry. So that's 67. So now let's go ahead and we start the instance. So we start the instance. Now remember earlier before we had associated an elastic IP address into our EC2 web server instances, we were being given a new public IPv4 address every time we stop and we start our instance. But now the fact that we associate an elastic IP address into our instance, the instance will no longer propagate a different IP address from the IP address that we associate to it from the elastic. So check this out. Now, if we refresh, and we go here, so now the status of the instance is running, right? So this basically, before we associate an elastic IP, we should have had a new IP address. Now, before we even switch over there to show you that, right? Let's just go here, back here again. So the IP address that we associate into our elastic pool is 44.206.144 and 67, right? So let's switch back out. So even though you stop, we start and we boot your IP addresses, the elastic IP, the elastic IP address and the private IPv4 IP address will stay the same. Now, if you go down here, let's see, yep. Let's see. The elastic IP address showing. So we have IPv4, private IP stay the same. VPC ID, subnet. Okay, so there we go. There we go. So that's what I wanted to show you. So we have the private IP, which is this IP. This is never changed. And the public IP, which used to change before we had associated an elastic IP. But now that we have the elastic IP, it shows you here and it will never change. So if you could click on there and find more information about the allocated IP addresses and stuff like that. So the association ID, the public IP, the scope, the network interface owner, account ID, and everything. So thank you so very much, guys. I appreciate you. Follow along. Stay tuned for more interesting video with AWS. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.